I was brought up in a religious family, hate religion. I think religion is at the heart of so much discontent and idiocy in the world. I think all faith is terror.
Robert Smith was never a symbol forged in stage lights. He was a product of isolation, inner torment, chronic depression, and near breakups with the very band he created. In a rock world where legends often rise from fire and fury, he quietly built an empire out of sorrow. No noise, no manifestos, no grasp for glory, yet the whole world still stopped to listen. With his disheveled hair, pale face, black-rimmed eyes, and a voice that sounded like it came from another dimension, Robert Smith never seemed to belong here. For nearly half a century, he followed no trends, and never once abandoned himself. As Gothic bands faded one by one, Smith remained. As the world basked in light, he chose the mist. From an outcast boy in Crawley to the soul of The Cure, from LSD trips, lawsuits, and near collapses to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, from haunting love songs to whispered reflections on disappearance, Robert Smith's life is a journey with no climax, yet no pause. He never tried to pull the world toward him. He simply opened a door for those who had nowhere else to go. And then, in 2024, he re-emerged, unchanged, with a new album, a sold-out world tour, and an old question that still has no answer. How can someone who has spent his life singing about loneliness, loss, and despair become the very symbol millions turn to for salvation? Join Rock Discovery as we trace that shadowed path, from gloomy Crawley to radiant Paris, from songs that never fit radio to a sorrow that felt real in the hearts of listeners. And if you've ever felt like you didn't belong in this world, maybe Robert Smith has already written a song just for you. Early life. Robert James Smith was born on April 21, 1959, in Blackpool, England, into a family that wasn't poor, wasn't abusive, but had no space for difference. When he was 3, the family moved to Crawley, a dreary town south of London where every house looked the same, every dream was fenced in, and the rhythm of passing trains ticked like a biological clock. For a child too sensitive, too quiet, and too unsure of how to fit in, Crawley felt more like a storage unit than a place to grow up. He was one of 4 siblings. His father was an engineer, his mother a homemaker. Decent people, but closed off, discouraging emotion, avoiding conversations about the inner world. Robert wasn't beaten or starved. He was simply forgotten in silence. He once said, "I grew up in a family where no one really talked. Everyone lived inside their own shell." Within those shells, there was only one person who offered Robert a glimpse of something else: his sister Janet, a quirky soul obsessed with psychedelic music, who painted her nails black and played bass in a local garage band. Janet was the first to introduce Robert to Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, David Bowie, Pink Floyd, and later, Susie and the Banshees, music that was warped, haunting, and filled with chaos. She didn't teach him how to live. She simply showed that being strange was a valid form of existence. No explanation needed. Robert instantly understood. This was his language. He started learning piano at 5, switched to guitar at 11, not to become a prodigy, but to keep himself from losing his mind. Every day, he sat in his room, listening to sounds no one else understood, writing lyrics no one wanted to read. Music wasn't a hobby. It was the only lifeline keeping him from slipping into non-existence. At school, he was labeled a weirdo. He didn't join in games, didn't belong to any clique, didn't conform. He hated teachers, hated blackboards, hated hollow lessons. He didn't rebel loudly. He withdrew quietly. He lived like a shadow. No one knew what he was thinking. No one even asked. And from that darkness, his first aesthetic began to take shape. A world without bright colors, without laughter. Just slow rhythms, sadness, and melodies perpetually out of tune. Robert Smith didn't grow up as a boy wounded by hardship. He grew up as someone who was never taught how to exist, and chose strange music as a form of instinctual survival. Early career. In 1976, as punk rock was setting England ablaze with rage and noise, Robert Smith and a few school friends formed a band called Easy Cure, not to change the world, but to carve out a small corner where they could simply breathe. The group included his close friend Lol Tolhurst on drums, Michael Dempsey on bass, and Porl Thompson on lead guitar. The name Easy Cure came from a nonsensical poem Tolhurst had written while drunk, a fitting reflection of the band's spirit. No one quite knew what they were doing, only that they didn't belong anywhere else. In 1978, after Porl Thompson left the group, they changed their name to The Cure. That same year, they signed their first record deal with Fiction Records, a small, daring label willing to gamble on a band that didn't look or sound like it would ever sell records. Their debut album, Three Imaginary Boys, 1979, delivered a minimalist blend of punk and new wave, short, sharp, cold, and sounded like nothing else on the radio at the time. Robert didn't write songs to be hits. He wrote them like whispered thoughts into a void. Early tracks like 10:15 Saturday Night and Grinding Halt weren't messages. They were scattered diary entries about boredom, disorientation, and being trapped in identical days. But it was that bleakness that made people take notice. In 1980, 17 Seconds marked a distinct shift into gothic rock. Darker, slower, as cold as echoes in an empty house. A Forest became their first real breakthrough, bleak, hypnotic, and elusive. Robert was only 21, yet his music sounded like it had wandered through decades of despair. Next came Faith, 1981, an album with no climax, just 38 minutes of dense fog with low, rumbling bass, dirge-like guitar, and a voice nearly stripped of emotion. Then came Pornography, 1982, where everything collapsed. Recorded during a time when the band was exhausted, drinking heavily, using LSD, and barely speaking, the album opened with the line, "It doesn't matter if we all die." Pornography was both a peak and a precipice. The accompanying tour descended into chaos, and Robert believed The Cure would break up. He wasn't even sure he'd survive it. After one performance, he smashed his guitar on stage, disappeared backstage, and told Tolhurst, "That's enough." But the band didn't fall apart. And Robert Smith, rather than break down, did what few dared to do. He made a hard turn. He stepped out of the darkness, not because he had escaped it, but because he knew if he went any deeper, there'd be no way back. Career breakthrough. After Pornography, Robert Smith stood at a crossroads, either withdraw completely or find a way to survive without losing himself. He chose the latter, not by softening his music, but by distorting it just enough to make others believe he was happy. In 1983, Robert temporarily joined Susie and the Banshees, a band that had deeply influenced him, replacing guitarist John McGeoch on tour. That experience taught him something vital. Sometimes, to save a project, you have to step away from it. Around the same time, he teamed up with Banshees bassist Steven Severin to form a side project called The Glove, releasing the album Blue Sunshine, a strange, psychedelic record that sounded nothing like The Cure. It was the step back he needed. When he returned, The Cure was no longer the same. Michael Dempsey was gone, replaced by Simon Gallup. The rhythm changed, the lyrics grew sharper, the melodies occasionally opened toward the light, a cold, synthetic light, but light nonetheless. The Head on the Door, 1985, was a turning point. The track In Between Days became an international hit, while Close to Me, with its strange nasal breathing sounds and swaying drum machine, proved that The Cure didn't need to be loud to make a hit. For the first time, the band wasn't just heard, they were remembered. But it was Disintegration, 1989, that etched The Cure into legend. Written as Robert Smith approached age 30, a milestone he believed he wouldn't survive, The album was a deliberate burial. Each song felt like ashes laid gently over the fear of vanishing. Pictures of You, Lovesong, Fascination Street, Plain Song, none of them happy, yet all of them hauntingly beautiful. Disintegration sold millions, placing The Cure among the most influential alternative bands globally. But Robert didn't change. He didn't switch to pop, didn't score blockbuster soundtracks, didn't collaborate with hot new acts. While other Gothic contemporaries like Bauhaus, Joy Division, and Susie either disbanded or reinvented themselves, The Cure endured, like a crack that never healed. The 1990s saw albums like Wish, 1992, with the hit Friday I'm in Love, a track many goth fans deemed too bright, but which brought The Cure to a broader audience. Smith didn't care. For him, writing a happy song didn't mean selling out, as long as it was honest. Since then, The Cure may no longer dominate the charts, but they've never vanished. Their tours still sell out worldwide. Fans wait hours just to see him, still, silent, and singing like tomorrow doesn't exist. Robert Smith never chased success, but when success found him, he didn't run and he didn't bow. He simply stood still and let what truly belonged to him speak for itself. Turmoil and rumors. Robert Smith never made it onto the list of shock value artists. No arrests, no domestic scandals, no public apologies. But much like his music, seemingly quiet, yet always harboring a fracture beneath, his life has never been short of quiet, simmering turmoil that has lasted for decades. In the early 1980s, during The Cure's so-called dark period with 17 Seconds, Faith, and culminating in pornography, Robert fell into what he would later describe as barely being in control of myself. He was using LSD nearly every day, drinking alcohol like water, suffering from chronic insomnia, and recording in a state of near-total detachment from reality. The 1982 tour ended in a full collapse. Communication within the band broke down. Robert walked off stage coldly and disappeared backstage, and no one expected them to go on. He never announced it, but those close to him understood. Had Robert Smith not chosen to write music to survive, he might not have been here today. A few years later, the turmoil came not from within, but from outside, specifically from his closest friend, Lol Tolhurst. They were schoolmates, co-founders of the band, two boys who'd grown up together recording their first tracks in a damp room. But by the early 1990s, Tolhurst, after being fired due to alcoholism and creative decline, came back not to reconcile, but to sue. The 1994 royalties lawsuit dragged on for months, filled with paperwork, tension, and bitterness. Robert won. But he wasn't triumphant. He only said one thing afterward: "I wish it had never happened." Since that day, the word friend seemed to shift forever in the emotional dictionary of Robert Smith. Outside the backstage world, Robert's image, with smeared red lipstick, heavy black eyeliner, messy hair, and ghostly pale face, became the subject of countless rumors that spanned 3 decades. Some claimed he was gay because he almost never appeared publicly with his wife. Others speculated he was asexual, as his music rarely spoke of desire. Accusations emerged that The Cure worshipped Satan, glorified suicide, or robbed youth of their innocence with haunting lyrics. But Robert never denied it, nor did he confirm. He just remained silent, the way he always handled things he didn't believe needed an explanation. He stayed free of scandal, but Robert was never polite toward the music industry. In 2023, when Ticketmaster charged excessive service fees for The Cure's tour tickets, he personally demanded refunds for fans, and won. No dramatic statements, no slogans, just one sentence: "It's wrong. Fix it." That same year, he continued to criticize Spotify for underpaying artists. As for modern pop stars, he once sneered, "The music they make has no soul, but what's terrifying is that the audience doesn't need it anymore." Robert Smith never lost his reputation to some public downfall. But that doesn't mean he never fell. He simply fell inward, without letting anyone see. And when he stood up again, he didn't apologize. He didn't ask for applause. What he left behind wasn't repentance or a restored title, but a string of songs so sorrowful they couldn't possibly lie. Personal life. If there's one chapter in Robert Smith's life that he has guarded more than any other, it is his personal life. In over 40 years of public existence, he's never been caught in a romantic scandal, never leaked family photos, never walked a red carpet with his wife. And strangely enough, no one ever felt the need to question whether love truly existed in his life, even though it was rarely, if ever, seen. Robert met Mary Poole in 1976 when they were both studying fine art at Crawley College. They were just 17. There was no love at first sight, no cinematic storyline, just two people sitting in the same class, living quietly, never quite belonging to the world around them. And so, they stayed. No one remembers exactly when they fell in love, only that from that moment on, Mary was always there. They married in 1988, right when The Cure was at the height of global success. While their peers were cycling through noisy relationships, messy divorces, and media scars, Robert and Mary remained silent. No children, no scandals, no public statements defending one another, because there was never any attack. Only once did Robert mention his wife on television, saying, "Mary is the only person who makes me feel like I'm not pretending to exist." Years later, Mary quietly stopped appearing on tour. No announcements, no explanations. It wasn't until Robert canceled a slew of scheduled performances that people realized she was undergoing serious medical treatment. He disappeared from the public eye for nearly a year. No new music, no interviews. And when he returned, he simply said, "I can't write anything when she's not okay." Their marriage has never been the subject of headlines, but it lingers in The Cure's music, like a persistent whisper, a presence that never quite leaves the listener's mind. Lovesong, the ballad written for Mary as a wedding gift, is not a grand declaration. It's merely a quiet promise. Whatever words I say, I will always love you. No flourish, no imagery, no justification. Robert once said he never felt the need to be a father. Not out of fear of responsibility, but because I don't think I'm stable enough to help another being make it through this world. For him, love doesn't have to culminate in a new generation. Sometimes, it's simply two people walking through life together, without needing anyone to witness it. Even within the band, he maintains a distance. After the lawsuit with Lol Tolhurst, he stopped calling anyone his best friend. No closeness, no reunions, no post-show drinks. Even longtime bandmates admit Robert speaks very little. But when he writes a song for you, you know you're staying. In a world where artists increasingly expose everything, from breakfast to their bed sheets, Robert Smith has chosen to keep the only thing that truly matters hidden. Not because he's concealing it, but because he understands. The more some things are told, the easier they are to lose. Legacy and influence. Robert Smith has never made grand declarations about artistic purpose. He's never claimed to be an icon, never spoken of influence, never sought a place in any pantheon of legends. And yet, ironically, it is precisely that refusal that has made him one of the most enduring, resilient figures in a world of artists who shift colors with every tour cycle. The Cure has sold over 30 million albums, toured across continents, and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019. Figures that could fill any Hall of Honor. In 2023, Rolling Stone named Robert Smith one of the 200 greatest singers of all time, ranking him at number 157. It wasn't a surprise, nor was it a triumph. It was a belated acknowledgement of a voice that defied technical norms, but made millions feel heard, even if their names were never called. To those who came of age in the 1980s and 1990s, The Cure wasn't a band. It was a refuge. Songs like Pictures of You, lullaby, a forest, and plain song didn't explain emotions or guide listeners anywhere. They simply existed, quiet and cold, echoing exactly what it feels like when no one stays. Robert's visual style, wild hair, pale face, dark eyes, red lips, was once mocked as bizarre, but later became the template for modern Gothic aesthetics. He has often rejected the label godfather of goth, insisting that The Cure was never a band confined to a single tone. Yet it's hard to deny that a generation of artists, from Radiohead, Nine Inch Nails, and Interpol to My Chemical Romance, were shaped by the world Smith built, a world where depression needn't be hidden and difference didn't need to be fixed. Even the way Robert stands on stage has reshaped our understanding of a frontman. He doesn't step forward, doesn't hype the crowd, doesn't engage. He stands still singing lyrics that don't come easy, with a face that makes no effort to charm. And somehow, he holds thousands of eyes, as if they're seeing themselves reflected in him. In an age where artists loudly champion freedom of expression while chasing algorithms and image, Smith chooses silence. And that silence becomes the clearest manifesto. Music doesn't need to be easy or cheerful or viral. It just needs to be true. Robert Smith didn't build an empire, but he left behind something far harder to destroy. The feeling that your loneliness isn't yours alone. And perhaps for those who've ever felt invisible in a crowd, ever watched love vanish like smoke, ever lain awake burdened by unnamed sorrows. His legacy doesn't live on album covers or in museums, but deep inside a song no one asked for, yet saved more people than any advice ever could. Present life. At 65, Robert Smith is still touring, still dressed in black from head to toe, still wearing heavy eyeliner, still tousled hair, still silent on stage. Thousands continue to wait for him each night, not to hear something new, but to witness something that hasn't changed. In a world where young artists must release music monthly, promote weekly, and reinvent themselves daily, Smith chooses to remain intact, as if time brushes past him but never touches. In 2024, after 16 years of studio silence, The Cure released a new album, Songs of a Lost World. No announcement, no gimmicks, just new songs, cold, haunting, and vast, as if written from a place that doesn't exist on any map. The album received widespread critical acclaim. Many hailed it as The Cure's best since Disintegration, 1989. But Robert didn't accept the praise. He simply said, "I don't know if it's good. I just knew I couldn't keep it in my head any longer." No social media, no podcasts, no late-night talk shows. Robert lives with his wife in a house in Sussex, far from London, address undisclosed. No PR team, no image consultant. When communication is needed, he writes the emails himself. When responding to press, he sends a Word document. No logo, no signature. His silence isn't a strategy. It's who he is. The shows of a Lost World tour sold out across Europe, North America, and Australia. Each night, he stands still before tens of thousands. No banter, no bow. But the audience doesn't leave, because they're not there for connection. They're there to remember, to see an old version of themselves reflected in a voice that hasn't changed. In 2023, he publicly criticized Ticketmaster for inflating service fees on The Cure's tickets. He demanded refunds for fans, and succeeded. No lawyers, no press conferences, just a few lines on the band's Twitter and a direct email to the executives. That act made him a rare figure in modern rock, the last one still standing with the audience, not for metrics, not for KPIs. In a rare interview with The Times, Smith said he might retire in 2029, exactly 50 years after the band formed. "Not because I'm tired," he said, "but because I'm not sure if what I do is still needed." But then he smiled, half serious, half avoidant, and added, "Though I've been saying that since 1999. For now, Robert Smith is still writing, still recording on magnetic tape, still obsessively checking every sound. No AI, no new contracts, no fan apps. He simply continues doing what he's always done, writing music for people who don't know how to speak. Robert Smith is not the last artist of his generation, but perhaps he is the last who has never strayed from himself. In an industry where change is considered a matter of survival, he chose stillness, not out of stubbornness, but because he understands, the more something stays the same, the more precious it becomes. For over 40 years, Robert hasn't chased anything, nor has he tried to leave anything behind. He simply kept going, quietly, steadily, without needing to prove a thing. From Crawley to Paris, from LSD and despair to sold-out arenas across the globe, from rule-breaking lyrics to a number 157 spot on the list of the greatest singers of all time, his journey has no peaks, no sharp turns, only a foggy straight line stretching all the way to today. To the world, he is the frontman of The Cure. To fans, he is the one who gave a name to the sorrow they couldn't articulate. And to himself, perhaps he is just someone who writes music because he doesn't know how else to exist. And it is that simple admission, unmythologized, unromanticized, that makes his legacy irreplaceable. Robert Smith hasn't stepped back. He's just chosen to walk alone, at a pace the world no longer has the patience to follow. If there's ever been a Cure song that held you together through a long night, leave a few words in the comments. And if you want to join Rock Discovery in finding more of these seemingly quiet souls who ended up shaping a generation, hit subscribe. There are still many stories left to tell.